So we're sitting at the bar talking, and my buddy Mike walks up, who works with me, and kind of gets in the conversation and just looks at, the other guy. Guy's name is Zach. Looks at Zach and goes, "Hey man, you should ask John about his podcast he's got. It's pretty interesting." And I was like
Uh-oh.
randomly, he throws that in there. So he turns and he looks at me. He was like, "You got a podcast?" And I was like, "Well, we kind of just launched it. We've done like 2 episodes." He's like, "Well, what's it about?" And I was like, "Well, I mean, it's three guys of faith just sitting down talking about life in general and, how we navigate everything, being men of faith." And he goes, "Oh." He goes, "Well, I'm an atheist." And I said, "Okay." And he goes, "Yeah, I was brought up in the church, but whenever you watch your dad die in front of you at the age of 12, you start to question things." And I was like, "Bro,
It's rough.
that's tough." And he goes into detail about how his dad drowned in front of him and how he felt helpless at the age of 12, couldn't do it. Said he sat there with his stepmom, and his stepmom didn't do anything, and it just gave him questions. And that night that their pastor came over to the house, and about how infuriated he was that this guy was standing in their house trying to tell them, you got to have faith, you got to believe in God. And he had a few choice words, and basically told that pastor to get out of his house at the age of 12.
Yeah.
And he's got an older brother who, kind of had the same feeling and sentiment. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, "Okay, God." Like, you're throwing me in, head first. And I was like, "Man, like, I can't even sympathize with you. I can't even imagine what it's like to lose your dad." And we start talking, and like, he starts firing questions at me, and questions that I've been asked before, and I've never felt comfortable with the answer that I gave, but I have no doubt that, like, literally in that moment, like, the Holy Spirit was giving me the words that I needed to say. And then I shared my story with him, and about what I went through with divorce and then with stepdads. And I told him the story about my sister's dad and, him putting my mom into the hospital for a week, where that went, and then him getting remarried and having 2 little girls. And I'll share the full story sometime, but I will say it's pretty devastating. He ended up taking his 2 daughters' lives, as I don't even think I can put the words in to give a justification for why he did it, because there is none. But it kind of left Zach sitting there going, and I said, "Look, man, that doesn't compare to losing, a father." I said, "I'm not trying to compare my story to yours." And he was like, "Man," he was like, it's kind of interesting seeing somebody that's been through something similar, but your faith is strong." And I was like, "It is," I said, "but it took work." It took a lot of humbling. It took a lot of prayer. It took a lot of other people, to get me to where I am. It's not at all something that you can do on your own. I said, "But any questions that you have, man, just, fire them at me." And we sat at that bar, a bar in Sin City on the Strip, for an hour and a half. And there were times that I thought the conversation was over, and he kept asking questions, and he kept asking questions. And by the time we ended and we were sitting at that table, he looked over at me and he was like, "Man," he goes, "I've never had anybody answer the questions the way that you did." He was like, "Not once did I ever feel like you were trying to convince me of something. Never once did I feel like you looked down on me because of my belief."
Right.
He was like, and I've asked these questions before to people that have faith, and they've never been answered in the way that you answered them."
Right.
He goes, "You have me questioning my faith."
Right.
And it was an unbelievable feeling to be able to sit there and talk with somebody that flat out tells you at the beginning of the conversation, "I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. You're not going to convince me anything." And I told him, I said, "This is not my job to convince you."
Right.
I said, "I can tell you my experiences, and I can lead you down the path that, Christ has led me.
Yeah.
And I can tell you from my studies how I understand and how I interpret things. And it was funny because that led to us going back to the Airbnb, and this brings in work. Going back to the Airbnb, and the guys start off making fun of me. They're like, "What, are you gonna marry that dude? You were talking to him at the at the bar for an hour and a half. What were y'all talking about?" It's like, you really want to know?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And my buddy Mike, who was there with me, he's a believer too. He's got real strong faith too. And him and I just started, talking with him. And next thing you know, it's question after question. Even from guys that, that have faith and that believe, they still had questions.
Right.
Like, I've always wondered about this. What is your response to this? Mm-hmm. And we were able to sit there we were up till almost 4:30 in the morning that day or that night, talking about Jesus, talking about the gospel, talking about what it is to live a faith-filled life.
Right.
And like I went to bed that night or that morning, and all I could do was just thank you. I asked that question.
Yeah.
I was terrified when I asked that question because I think we all deal with this, but there's doubt,
Right.
And I doubted what my reaction was going to be when God presented me with that situation. And sometimes you just got to dive in and you just got to go for it. And that's new to me.